All right, welcome to the Ravit Show. We are here at AI Summit New York, and look who I have with me. I've been connected since years with Oz, who's the CTO at lakeFS. Oz, first of all, good to see you in person, and welcome to the Ravit Show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to see you, and over the years, I think I was just telling you off air as well that I've seen lakeFS grow so much over the years, and obviously all the amazing things that you all are doing in this space. So it's now time for my audience to learn more in depth about what you all do and how you all are kind of obviously making strides in the data and AI space. So just to start with, would you like to quickly introduce yourself? Tell us more about what is lakeFS and why did you all start lakeFS?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Oz. I'm the CTO and co-creator of the lakeFS project.
Right.
Prior to that, I was VP R&D at a company called SimilarWeb,
Yep.
which is a big analytics company,
Yeah.
where I happened to accidentally delete about a petabyte of data, which I was not supposed to delete.
Ooh.
Coincidentally, now I'm working on data version control, right? Which is might not be that coincidental. So the backstory was we were working on a very large data lake, right? Petabytes of data in size,
Right.
on top of AWS's S3, but it could have been any other cloud for that matter.
Yep.
And we were doing like everything textbook, right?
Yep.
As prescribed by the cloud provider, following all the best practices. And still we found ourselves on like a very error-prone environment, right? We have multiple engineers, in some cases tens or even hundreds of engineers, all working on the same data sets.
Yep.
And this becomes a challenge really quickly, right? With people stepping on each other's toes, someone deletes something by accident maybe, and then downstream things are starting to break, right? And
Right.
this happens all the time, especially at scale. And we were looking at like the way applications are being developed, right? Not on the data side, but like on the more like web apps.
Yep.
And for that, we have best practices which have been in place for years, right? We've all been using Git and GitHub for decades now.
Yeah.
And before that, source control was already something that's like every organization was using. But on the data side, we were all touching production directly.
Right.
And to us, that felt kind of not the way it should be. So with that, we thought like, how can we bridge that gap? How can we implement those same best practices that we have for code, bring them to the data world? And data version control is a big part of that story.
Right.
Right? GitHub would not exist without Git, without the versioning aspect.
Exactly.
That's what we're after.
That's very cool. That's a very good backstory in terms of how it all started. And I didn't know about it, so I'm thrilled to hear that story. Thanks for sharing that. I'm also kind of excited to hear a little about initially what did you think? Who are you building this for? But over the years, you all have evolved. We all have evolved. Now, where do you see it going? What type of different personas are using lakeFS? I know data engineers being one of the biggest piece of the puzzle here, but who others are actually using it and making the most of lakeFS?
Well, that's a very good question. So it's interesting because if you were to ask me that same question maybe 2 years ago, I would have given a completely different answer. So
exactly.
It's been an interesting journey. So first I'll start, like lakeFS itself is open source, right? So
Right.
a lot of the people using lakeFS didn't tell me that they're using lakeFS. I probably might never know, right? We see like all the time examples of people coming in, starting asking questions on our Slack or looking at the commercial features, and we never even knew that they were using lakeFS,
right.
and they might have been using it for years, which
True.
is incredible to see like the community grow. In terms of companies, so we don't have like a strong affinity to any vertical. It's not like only for this type of companies. We do see, I guess, more need or more pressing pain for like bigger enterprises.
Yep.
So like Fortune 100, defense companies, people doing like biotech or big data analysis, stuff like that. We see
Yep.
a lot of those.
Yep.
Again, they have that same pain that we started with.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing a lot nowadays, and I think that's maybe the big change, is that there's the market that we went after, but there's also the market that like kind of found us. And that's, I mean, we're here at the AI Summit in New York.
Yeah.
The AI use cases, especially around generative AI,
Yep.
there are no best practices there. It's all completely brand new.
Yeah.
Reproducibility of machine learning is such a hard problem. Like,
So true.
how do I explain the results I'm getting from that LLM?
So true.
And this is something that like lakeFS was not designed for, but found itself being a very good fit to those problems.
That's awesome. And that's what, evolving over time also means, right? Because space changes, you change, and if you kind of fit in that, it just becomes like a game changer.
Yeah.
So that's what y'all are doing, which is fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I'm kind of also curious. You mentioned about AI, right? And like I see so many companies out here talking about AI. I'm kind of curious to know, how does lakeFS help AI development go to market faster, and are there any use cases that you would like to share as well?
That's a very good question. So we talked before about that anonymous person whose name we won't mention that accidentally deleted a bunch of data. So like the cost of mistake.
Yeah.
Right. And if I look at like AI development environments nowadays, where you might have multiple data scientists all working together on the same project and basically stepping on each other's toes.
It can happen, right?
The amount of time spent cleaning data, massaging it, making it fit to the model that you're currently working on, it's so tedious to begin with. And like just being able to iterate on that process in a safe and clean environment becomes a really hard challenge.
Yep.
So first it's like reducing the cost of mistake, right?
Yep.
Being able to like have that big red button.
Right.
And second of all, like the isolation you get from branches also allows for that reproducibility to be baked in.
Yep.
I developed a model, I trained it against this data set, I can always go back to the exact same snapshot of the data and get back the same result,
right.
which is otherwise really hard to do because data keeps evolving, keeps changing, keeps
exactly.
moving. So that's a very big use case that we're now seeing.
I think that's definitely fantastic, and that's good news for enterprise leaders out there, and all the obviously practitioners as well. Quickly, also wanting to know a little about when we talk about AI. I was just talking to one of the enterprise leaders here at AI Summit, and what I was obviously curious to know is when we talk about AI, there's the we don't like. A lot of times we don't realize it is also about the data, right? It is always actually about the data, right?
It's always the data.
Yes, and talking about data quality is something which we've been hearing since last 1.5 year, and we've been talking about it since years, but since AI has kind of obviously grown so massively, there are folks who are now focusing on certain parts of data and data quality being top of that. How is lakeFS kind of solving that problem of data quality and improving that for the larger enterprises out there?
Yeah, so I think maybe like the old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out, right? And like you can build the best, most advanced artificial brain out there, raise a bunch of money doing so, and then bring it to users who would fit it garbage and get garbage in return, right? And that's not a good experience.
Yeah.
So if you want to build something that's trustworthy, you need to fit it high quality data. So the need is obviously there, even more so nowadays than it typically is, right? In terms of how lakeFS fits into that story, so we talked about like Git and GitHub as kind of best practices.
Yep.
So like if you go to the GitHub landing page, they don't even talk about Git being a part of the story. They talk about like this is where engineers come together to collaborate and build better products. This is also our take. Versioning is a means to an end in that case, right? But what you're actually after is that workflow. Right? So imagine now if I'm introducing new data into my organization, I have to do it on its own branch, on an isolated branch, and have those same GitHub actions that you have, like those green checkboxes.
Right.
And these would enforce data quality, it would enforce privacy, so you're not leaking PII, it would enforce that schema is not breaking over time, and only once those checkboxes are green can you introduce new data into like the main branch, what everyone else is consuming.
Yep.
So essentially, lakeFS doesn't solve the data quality problem, but it lets you implement data quality as a gatekeeper, right? As a step in the process.
Which is very important again. Right?
Yeah, and it's hard to do otherwise.
Yes.
It's hard to
So true, so true. I think those are fantastic insights. One more quick question. Since we are just around 2025, what are the trends that you're seeing that excites you? And what can we expect from lakeFS in 2025?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, if you just walk around the conference here, I think a theme that's now recurring, and maybe that's the market that's being a bit more advanced nowadays, is that, yes, everyone is pushing towards LLMs and generative AI, and that's all happening, But now they're also focusing on like efficiency and cost.
Very
so
true.
it's not just let's do LLMs at any price, regardless. We have to be on that train, right?
Yeah.
And we are looking at the ROI, and we are looking to produce things of high quality. And I think that's a trend that we're definitely seeing.
So true.
So you talked about data quality, that's a big part of it, but like it's also governance and access controls, which are a big part.
Very true.
And I think we will see LLMs maturing. So maybe some of the hype will kind of fade away, and we will be left with things that are very useful. What these would end up being, I think, still up for grabs.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that I believe like humanity can benefit from. I think it's a big advancement.
100%, I agree, because that's what even the enterprise leaders are looking at right now is the ROI. That can only happen with the efficiency and the real implementation. And as mentioned, we're going to see some maturity happening in the LLM space as well.
Yeah.
So these are key things, and I'm excited about those as well in 2025. So looking forward to that. One last question for you is, if folks want to reach out to you, learn more about lakeFS, the things that you all do. I know you all publish a lot of blogs, resources for our audience. So where can they do that?
So I guess the best place to start from would be just lakefs.io. That's
Okay.
our landing page.
Okay.
From there, check out the GitHub. There's a pretty active community of people using and contributing to lakeFS.
Nice.
As well as the Slack channel, which is super active with lots of data practitioners, all with the same problem space, all like dealing with the same challenges.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
that would be the best place.
the most fun thing to obviously work is when you all have same problems and you all can be at the same place. Slack channel always is like a game changer for all the engineers and obviously practitioners out there. So that's awesome. But once again, such a pleasure chatting with you on the Ravit Show, and finally good to meet you in person. We'll keep the conversation going. We'll keep talking about what's happening in 2025, and definitely we'll share all the links with our folks so they can be in touch with lakeFS and the developments that happen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.